Bessie Coleman was born on January 26, 1892, in Atlanta, Texas. Her parents were George and Susan Coleman, who were illiterate children of slaves. Coleman was the 10th child out of the 13 children George and Susan had together. Coleman had limited resources and only received 8 years of formal education. The school was low quality and would often cancel classes so students could help their parents with the harvest. When Coleman was a teenager, her father left the family. Her mother and older brothers immediately took on jobs, leaving Bessie as the caretaker for her 2 younger sisters. Every evening, she would also read aloud to her family. She later became a laundress and began saving up money to further her education. In 1910, she left for Oklahoma to attend Langston University. Unfortunately, she ran out of money after only 1 year. 5 years later, she enrolled in Burnham School of Beauty Culture to become a manicurist in Chicago. Coleman eventually went to work at the White Sox barbershop, which was owned by the White Sox trainer. It was here that she heard great stories told by soldiers home from World War I. That was when she decided to become a pilot herself. Bessie Coleman continued to save up money and further her education. She took tests and applied to several aviation schools in the United States. Unfortunately, Coleman grew up in a time of gender and racial discrimination. Therefore, she was not accepted into any aviation schools in the United States. She was determined to keep the promise she made to her mother many years ago, to make something out of herself and to live a meaningful life. Coleman refused to accept no as an answer and sought out help from Robert Abbott. Robert Abbott was an African-American lawyer, a newspaper editor and publisher of the Chicago Defender, which was the most successful African-American newspaper at the time. Abbott, interested in making Coleman the first African-American female pilot, became her sponsor and advised that she apply to aviation schools in France, as race was not an issue there. France was also a world leader in aviation. Coleman accepted his advice and enrolled in a French class and taught herself French and applied to several schools. And finally, Coleman was accepted to the most famous aviation school in France. On November 20th, 1920, Bessie Coleman sailed to Paris. She learned how to fly in an 8-meter biplane, which is a training plane based off an observation aircraft from World War I. These planes were also used as bombers, but had a short frontline career, and only a small number of these planes were produced. On June 15, 1921, Bessie Coleman became the first person of both African American and Native American descent to receive their aviation license. She was also the first person of African American and Native American descent to receive an international license from the World Air Sports Federation. When she returned to the United States, she had become a celebrity, especially in the African American press. Coleman became an influential woman. The Defender and a banker, Jesse Binga, funded her trip to Europe as they were excited to see a black female pilot. Coleman came back to America and realized that with the age of commercial flight, that the only way she was to live a successful life as a civilian pilot, she would need to become a barnstorming stunt flyer. Again, she struggled finding anyone to teach her in America, so she set sail to Europe once again. This trip was also funded by Jesse Binga. She returned to France where she took an advanced aviation course, and she met Anthony Fokker, a distinguished aircraft designer, for a few months in the Netherlands. She also visited Fokker Corporation in Germany, where she received instruction from a chief pilot on staff. She returned to the United States of America, where she began her career. She became widely popular and was given the name Queen Bess. She was given this name in honor of her bravery and grace. She went on to perform at several important events and had her first American Air Show debut on September 3, 1922. During this time, she mostly flew Curtiss JN-4 Jenny biplanes, which were originally training planes for World War I. After the conclusion of the war, Jennies were still being produced as a civilian aircraft and became a backbone for civilian aviation at this time. She loved stunt flying, but she never lost sight of the other half of her dream, to amount to something. She had dreamed of opening up an aviation school in the United States that would teach African Americans how to fly. Determined, Coleman opened up a beauty shop with a friend to begin saving money for her own plane. She purchased her own plane, and on April 30th, 1926, Coleman, along with a Texan mechanic, took her plane out for a ride to make observations about the land for her show the next day and to check out the engine. It was believed that the plane was not taken care of by the previous owner. Coleman did not have her seatbelt on as she was leaning over the edge making observations, and the engine failed. Coleman fell from the plane and died on impact, and the Texan mechanic died as well with the plane. Though Bessie Coleman dreamed of opening up an aviation school for African American people, her dream never came true since she died so young and abruptly. Bessie Coleman was an inspiration as she was the first African American woman to receive her pilot's license. Against all odds and difficulties, her hard work and determination prevailed. She stood by her beliefs and did not play into segregation. She refused to fly for any event or venue that was segregated. Coleman proved time and time again that she was going to stand by her beliefs and make the world a better place for the generations to come.